My name is Lita Citroen, and I founded a company called Lita 360 based in Colorado. So thank you for the nice weather. We certainly appreciate it. To those of you who have served or are a military spouse, I want to start off by thanking you for your choice to serve and thanking you for my freedom. My mother was raised in a communist country, and from a very early age, she taught me that freedom doesn't come for free. So she said, if you ever get a chance to say thank you, you make sure you do so. So thank you from my family to yours. I am a civilian with absolutely no personal connection in terms of family to the military. But for the past 14 years, I've been working in this space, mostly, as Dan says, volunteering my time and my services. My specialty is reputation management and personal branding, volunteering those services to help transitioning service members and their spouses assimilate into the civilian culture after a military career. And as a civilian, I still don't know half of what I should know. So if you have questions about what the conversation looks like, what the resume looks like, how to interview, what some of the challenges are, you're in a great place, because I know in meeting with each of these experts in their field, they're going to reveal some fabulous insights. I've written several books. 3 of them have been in the military space about transition. My TED Talk was even on the topic of how we can, as civilians, share gratitude by serving those who've served. So I am deeply honored to be here with all of you and look forward to having a conversation with our panelists. I want to introduce them first, and then we're going to go to the question. To my immediate left here is Tricia McGrath-Hess, who is not just a recruiter, but she is the lead of the VetNet NYC group at Google. Small company, maybe you heard of them. And military spouse, yes, absolutely. Next to her is Jeremy Strathmeyer, Vice President of Client Engagement at Greencastle Consulting. And then we have, like Cher, he goes by one name, Oli, who leads military talent strategy at USAA. And then finally, last but not least, is Bobby Thompson, Director of Construction for Caruso Homes. And we're going to talk about the military resume. So let me start off with the first question, and Tricia, we can start with you. What are you seeing when it comes to military resumes? What's working, what isn't, through the lens of how Google looks at resumes?
Right. Well, we see all different kinds of resumes, and some are good, Lita, and some are not so good. We see people who try to translate their resume so much into the civilian world that they have lost a lot of what makes them special and the shine and what they would really bring to the role. And so I think that there's a fine line to walk between making your resume be civilian-like and sort of taking it out and getting rid of all of the amazing military experience. So I think that that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot of. And, also, we want to see, recruiters want to see metrics, and we want to see accomplishments on your resume. And some veterans, I know you know this because you work with them all the time, they don't like to brag. They don't like to toot their own horn. They don't like to sell themselves or market themselves. And a resume is, and always will be, a marketing document. And I think that we need to sort of help our military veterans to understand that a little bit.
I appreciate that. And Jeremy, when we were talking, you mentioned that your company only hires veterans, and you are a veteran yourself.
Yeah, so Greencastle, we're a medium-sized company, about 120 employees, and every employee is a veteran. We strictly recruit and hire veterans only, which makes us a little bit unique because I don't see civilian resumes. I see all military resumes. So, and I primarily do most of our hiring. So with that, I get to see the whole spectrum of the resumes that come to us, all the way from completely whitewashed, from all military experience. They very blandly write about, if they were a company commander, let's say in the Army, they will focus solely on leadership, and they will take all of the military experience out. They will take all of the logistic experience out that they had during that command time. They will take out all of the direct counseling and HR functions that they conducted. They will take all of that out. And that's almost inherent to the transition program in the military that we found, is that's what they're telling them to do. They're telling them to whitewash the military out of it and try to relate it mostly to their military experience. But the problem with that is they don't know how to translate the skills properly. So they're missing that key component. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where it is so military focused, to what Mike said earlier, all the acronyms and all the wings and all the ship assignments and everything they have on there. I don't even know. And I was in the Army for 28 years, retired as a command sergeant major. I still don't know most of those acronyms that are coming across my desk. So, to be able to see the different sides of that, to find that mushy middle is really where we need to get to with, our transition program in the military.
I like that, the mushy middle.
I like mushy middle. Yeah.
It's like a technical term.
It is
And-
very
and-
technical.
Only,
very technical.
obviously, USAA supports military personnel and their families. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the resumes?
Yeah, I like how both of those. I like both of those, the marketing tool analogy and the mushy middle. And I know, to be honest, I think we're preaching to the choir, right, to everybody in this room, especially if that's part of your strategy at your companies. I agree with everything, all the above, and you're going to hear that a lot. At USAA, I think for us, we look at it, it's a two-way street, right? The veteran has to do their, and spouses have to do their part, but so do the companies. So for us, we focused really a lot internally to develop our recruiters on how to understand and translate that, right? Because I'll be honest, when I retired in 2016, there wasn't a lot of resources even that long ago. Now, the veterans are inundated with resources, and there's lots of organizations that will write the resumes for them, and we have already been trained to know exactly which organization wrote this resume for this veteran, right? I mean, the format's all the same, and so to that point, I think there's a lot to learn in this piece. But for us, we just kind of shifted it a bit and said, okay, we understand they're going to have the challenge of translating it. So what can we do internally to help us understand it better? And we built a lot of military acumen training, a lot of things internally for our recruiter cadre, so that we kind of view almost every recruiter as a military recruiter, for lack of better words.
Interesting. And Bobby, what about for you?
So I've had the pleasure of working for a regional builder currently and a national builder prior to that in the same veteran space, right? For Toll Brothers prior to Caruso Homes, I was part of the Diversity and Inclusion Council that launched the ERG and veteran program. So I can tell you that what we're seeing across the industry are resumes like Oli has referenced that are 100% a templated resume, and it's missing. I would like to focus on what it's not, what it's missing more so than what we're seeing, because what we're seeing is the same federal mandated templated resume, and it's missing a lot of those essential skills that Dr. Neves referenced earlier, and you've heard in some of the other panels. And with that, I think that the questions that your recruiters and your hiring managers, when they're reviewing these resumes, need to have on their initial inquiry is what does this mean? How do we dig into it? What are the essentials of the job? And skill bridge was referenced earlier in some of the other panels. When you go through the arduous process of building your skill bridge, a lot of those job descriptions will start to tap into the essential responsibilities and essential skills. And if you're putting some of that content in your job descriptions, you should, if the veteran is doing their due diligence, you should start to see that populate on the resumes. And I think it is a two-way street to improve what we're seeing in the resumes. And then when that information is not present, helping that veteran or that male spouse by advising them how they can improve for the better.
And one of the things I know I run into when I work with companies that are trying to either stand up a military hiring program or get theirs going in a more robust way is I'm not looking to hire 100,000 vets. I'm looking to hire 5, right? I'm hiring 10 people, 5 would be veterans. So to Oli, to your point about the training that you all do for your recruiters and you get them, into military speak, what can a company who maybe isn't, or even Jeremy, where you're not 100% focused on veterans, you just want to bring them into the conversation, what can those companies do to stand up or educate their recruiters? Oh,
yeah, that's a good question. I would start by saying just standardize the approach, right? Treat it. It doesn't, in my opinion, it wouldn't matter if you're a small business or a large company. The approach is honestly the same, right? If you have 2 recruiters or if you have 102 recruiters, you can still train them the same way so that they understand it. That's just my initial thought on it, because industry-wide, we understand the number one challenge is translating military experience. Number one, no matter what statistic you look at, it's always going to be that way. So we just kind of, again, reverse the role of it because we know that they're going to always have that challenge. So how can we headwind that is to kind of do it internally ourselves. From the veteran side, we do, of course, and I'm sure a lot of the companies, organizations here we help them. We're on the 4 blocks, we're on the O2Os, we're on all the different ways that we can get in front of the military community and help them understand how to do it. But no matter what happens, they're still going to submit, a similar type of a resume. So in my opinion, it's more of an art than a science on how you do it and tailoring that experience. And so, yes, they need that education. But at the same time, I think to offset some of that is what we've done internally.
Yeah, that's great points. We are all veterans, so we have the luxury of already knowing a majority of what people have done, experiences they've had, even if we get the very militarized resumes. If you're a company that, you want to know, or you want a better process, or you want a better way to identify a particular veteran's talents, find your tools from within your company. Find you an Oli, right? Find you somebody that has military experience. Find somebody that has a good acumen for recruiting, that is a veteran. Leverage the tools you already have, because you have a ton of knowledge in those vets that you haven't even begun to tap into. You already have these inside your companies. So leverage those folks to find that process that works. Find those points to ask, or those keywords to look for, or those experiences that'll help you identify good candidates from the veteran community.
I would also add that you should know what you don't know and what your company does or does not have, right? And so one of the key ways to do this, I know they were speaking earlier about the benchmarking, right? To quickly identify what you're lacking and get smart. Get your company smart on the things that it's not, and advocate for that underrepresented community. And it's not just, and I say this kind of whimsically, right? But if you think everyone keeps saying that how diverse veteran group is, but the intersectionality of the veteran group goes further than just race, right? Or gender. It goes much further. And if you're tapping into that, you need to make sure that the structure at your company can support it, right? And so that way it's just not a flash in the pan that everyone suspects diversity and inclusion is these days. You need to make sure that you're building the infrastructure to sustain it. So that way you don't do a check the box misnomer for your company.
Right. And what I will say that recruiters, we can train recruiters all day long, and we have an extensive training program at Google. But unless leadership is making it a priority, and unless you are able to get into your C-suite or management or leadership and have them say to the recruiters the recruiter's job is to go out and find people for the company, the right people, based on what the company is looking for. And of course, just what Bobby said, you have to know exactly what you're looking for, and you've got to task your recruiters and give them some guidance and direction. We're in the hiring business. We want to say yes to everyone. We want to hire all of you. Like, that's what we like to do. But if management says, look, it's now a priority, recruiters, we want you to hire veterans. Well, you know what? They're going to take that training. They're going to pay more attention to that training. They're going to talk to people in VetNet and the ERGs. They're going to speak to people within the company. Like we have a very robust VetNet listserv that people can ask questions, and we get people who send their friends to the listserv and say, we're trying to hire, we want this person to get a job. How do we do this? Who can help? And veterans are happy to raise their hand. I mean, veterans are so really leverage that group. I can't agree more with that because they want to help and they want to hire more veterans. You're a very loyal community. And by engaging them and engaging your own veterans and engaging your leadership, I think that that's going to be a recipe for success for getting more veterans hired.
I was just going to add one thing because I think Jeremy had brought up a minute ago, is utilizing the tools, right? Tommy, I believe, mentioned it earlier about offline or using some form of an automation. If you don't know about it, you can research them. But a couple of us, we identified, USA gets over 500,000 applications a year, right? So how do we take that and refine it down to where are the veterans and where are the spouses? Because for us, we have an enterprise-wide goal, right? That's established by the CEO. And so that leadership direction makes its way all the way down. So our VP in talent acquisition because of that, right? We understand the intent, we understand the purpose. She's been able to put in tools or automation within our talent acquisition processes. One of them is putting one on our website, which allows veterans and mill spouses to enter into that tool. They can plug it in. It's like a digital resume, but it aligns them specifically to the jobs that we have on our job board that they would never know that they're qualified for. So we use that automation tool. Another thing we've done as a best practice is we prioritize. So when the application pool comes in and say there's several hundred for one role, they can filter, all of our recruiters can filter and say, here, all the veterans and spouses to the top. And then they can start reviewing candidates based off of that, right? So there's different ways that you can incorporate it. It does start with leadership buy-in and being able to incorporate those processes, but that's a couple of things that we've done that I think were helpful whenever we are finally reviewing those candidates.
Something we talked about when we were chatting before we got up here is the idea of the holistic view of the veteran, right? Not just their MOS, not just what they've done since. And Jeremy, I think you mentioned that you'll often go to LinkedIn or you'll look for other ways to learn about the veteran's background, what their interests are. So how important is that when you look at a resume to look holistically at the candidate, specifically to fit into your culture?
Yes, when I'm reviewing resumes, and we get a lot too, primarily through SkillBridge. We utilize SkillBridge. We are a provider, so we'll get the resume from the veteran, and then a lot of times it's just not enough. Like for me, it doesn't satisfy what I want to know about that person. So then you just do the open source intel gathering, right? So you're going to LinkedIn, you're using Facebook and all the different social medias as well. But LinkedIn primarily, it's amazing when you look at someone's resume and you overlay it against their LinkedIn profile, it's never the same. It's never the same. And it always kind of blows my mind. It's the same job, but it's highlighting different experience, right? And a lot of times that's because they're trying to tailor their resume, because they're told to do this, tailor their resume to the job that they're looking for, right? Well, in our industry, in consulting, we don't necessarily have a specific thing we're looking for. We're looking for the holistic view of somebody, because I can teach anyone how to be a project manager. I can't teach them how to be, how to have good relationships or build trust with a client, right? So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So when I'm comparing the two, it's often interesting to see what skills are highlighting on each platform. So using LinkedIn gives you a lot of additional insight, not just with the information you're seeing on the website, but also trying to decipher why they are maybe different on both mediums.
I'm a devotee of LinkedIn, and you won't find a recruiter in the world who is not a devotee of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is absolutely amazing, but I would also say it's amazing not just for the employers and for recruiters, because we check everyone out on LinkedIn 100%. We see if you're being truthful about your dates. Some people's dates don't match. Some people's schools don't match. It's like, that's like no attention to detail. You know, that's like, we can't hire you if you have no attention to detail. But LinkedIn is so important also, though, for the veteran hiring and the veteran who's trying to understand, you know, civilian language, the civilian world. And, you know, if you go on to Only Site and go to USAA and you see a job that looks like it matches for you, then you can go on to LinkedIn and put that company and the title in and find out who has that job now. Who are the people in that role? Or who are the people in your project managers? And you can find that out, and you can even look at what they're doing and how they have described, and they could be former veterans, and see how they're describing themselves. So I can't say enough about LinkedIn. I feel like I'm a shill for LinkedIn. I've never worked there, I promise you. But it's just such an amazing tool that I think both hiring managers and companies and candidates, I don't think people do enough with it. And it's, the answers are all right there for you to find. And so I can't say enough good things about that.
And Lita, you have a really good book about owning the narrative, right, and branding. So it would go to the small plug, right? But no, it's great. It's great content, right? If you
Yay, Lita. Woo!
It's called Control the Narrative, by the way.
There you
If
go.
only I had the rights to the name.
It's available on Amazon, everyone.
So we're talking about transitioning service members, right? And when's the right timing to do it? And when I transitioned, I went through TAP like everyone else. And there is a small section that tells you to build your own LinkedIn account and et cetera. That's in the program. But one of the things that it doesn't actually give you the tools for success, the best practice, is to do what Trisha's mentioning, and that's to identify that introspective of what field you want to go into, and then start to build your network within that industry, right? And there are some industries that don't own their own brand as far as how friendly they are to veterans. The building industry is one of those that kind of missed that mark. And there's a huge campaign right now for builders to, like everyone else, tap into this awesome pool of candidates. And if your website for your company or your LinkedIn page for your company doesn't identify that you have transitional skill or transition jobs that translate for military service members, it's a miss. So it works both ways, right? So candidates need to do that due diligence, but so do the companies. And representing a middle-sized company similar to Jeremy, our company actually is starting to build that platform. It's going to be on our website. It's going to be on the LinkedIn. But if you know that if your company is not one of those, that's another benchmark to look at.
Well, let's talk about culture. It came up this morning quite a bit. You all have very different cultures. Let's just maybe start with Trisha, because there's a real fun word she's going to introduce us to. Tell us about how Google looks at veteran candidates in terms of culture fit.
Right. Well, Google looks at all candidates by kind of four ways, but the one that is what people would affiliate with soft skills is called Googliness. And that is, I know, well, we just say honestly, it's crazy the lingo that you get used to wherever you are. I'm sure you guys say that in the military. When you say some words to me, I'm like, what? And Googliness just rolls off the tongue now, which is insane. But we look for people who are comfortable in ambiguity, who are good team players, who do the right thing, who put the user first. Our culture is, and I would say this of all tech companies, is really important, and it's at the core and the center of everything we do. And that is something that we always look for very closely. And, you know, that sometimes, like the last panel, the gentleman on the end was saying, you know, we'll give veterans like this guide rail and this guardrail and this guardrail and tell them what they have to do over the next year. And that's just doesn't happen. I mean, that doesn't happen in my company or in other kinds of large companies, people don't have the time for that. You have to be comfortable in ambiguity. You've got to be able to roll with it. You've got to be comfortable being on one project and then being pulled off onto another project. And to be honest, that may be how your company is too, because when you're doing project management, some things are important and some things then aren't. But I would say soft skills and culture and being a culture carrier. And I use this example with Lita. I've told her this example more than once that, if I'm a recruiter and I sign an email, Trisha, then don't reply back to me and say Mrs. McGrath. Like, that's just not, because that just means that you haven't paid attention to what the culture is. I'm trying to help you. I'm a recruiter. I want to hire you. And I'm, of course, my MilSpouse, VetNet, all of it. I want to hire you, but you have to help me. You've got to show that you're getting the culture and you're willing to leave a little bit of the military culture behind when you go and embark on this new journey at a place that is very different from the military. And now let me pass it over to the other culture.
Yeah, so our culture, being 100% veteran, it's very unique. So, and we have to be careful because, within the four walls of our office or of our teams meeting, when it's internal Greencastle resources, we're much different than we are when we're client facing, right? Because it's a very comfortable atmosphere. So that's what brings a lot of veterans to our company, and that gives us the reputation in the veteran community that it does. Is our culture? Our CEO has this thing. Let's keep all the good stuff from the military, right? The camaraderie, the wanting to be better, the forward thinking, and let's get rid of all the bad stuff, right? Like 530 PT, right? So, so that's what we want to do. We want to be able to keep all the good stuff from the military within the four walls of our company, and get rid of all the bad stuff. And that seems to attract a lot of vets. Now, another thing that we do, because we're all veteran, is we have a 4-week onboarding process. So we're very deliberate with it. It's a very deliberate way that we kind of, I won't say beat the culture out of you from the military, because we want to maintain that, but how to be able to flip the switch for when you're on a call with me versus when you're on a call with, a VP at a Fortune 500 company, right? So how do you flip that switch? How do you teach them that? Well, that's what we do. We teach them corporate etiquette. We teach them how to be the thought leader in the room. We teach them how to effectively write an email, how, all the etiquette that goes into the communications that a lot of people in this room even take for granted because you've been doing it so long. So those are the softer skills that we teach them. You could argue they're hard skills in the corporate world, but that is one of the things we focus on, and we've created a program that's very deliberate because we are still unique as veterans.
Oli?
Quick poll. Raise your hand if you're a USAA member. Okay. Which is what I figured, right? So from the outside in, as a member, which we probably, most of us, again, are, right? We look at USAA with a very specific culture, right? It's our experiences that we've had, whether we file claims, whether our banking, whatever the case is, and most of it is vastly positive. So you flip that around on the inside, and the culture is the purpose at USAA is the member experience. The member experience is equal to the employee experience, right? So for us, as good as we feel as members, we want to make sure that our employees feel the same way. And so there's a lot of focus that goes into that. So from a cultural standpoint, a lot of times USAA is looked at as the seventh branch of the military. So the veterans like, oh, it's it's the seventh branch. From the non-military folks, they're like, I can't work there because only military can work there. We have kind of an internal battle on how to describe USAA, especially for people that are looking to get employed there. So that's one of the things, and I echo a lot of what y'all have done from a cultural side, but I just wanted to bring that up, that's kind of one of our focuses is to kind of help, again, storytelling. Ed, Tommy, and everybody was storytelling. That's all part about the culture, because when I was getting out, I understood very clearly what the culture of the military was, specifically the Marine Corps, without a question of a doubt. I didn't understand what that meant. When you talk about the culture of a corporate organization. So anyways, just wanted to.
Bobby?
So culture or googliness, however you put it, right? It has to permeate all the way through your entire company, right? And it's something that gets kind of presented to those candidates from your recruiters, right? And it should be apparent and visible in all of your marketing, all of your branding materials. What we find most oftentimes is really hard for candidates to know how to identify with a company just on face value. So if you know that your company doesn't have the rules to the road right off the bat, then you need to make sure that your representatives, right? It's a dual interview. Anytime someone's interviewing, it goes both ways, are actually giving the information to the candidate and can translate it to someone that you know is coming from a different walk of life. And if you don't have the skill set, and this is part of that benchmarking conversation, if your hiring managers, if your recruiters aren't up to speed on that, then that's something that you're going to have to do and train up. And there's several partners of Vets Indexes that's what they do. They train and they consult, and there are some free things that are out there and advocacy programs that are out there to get everyone smart on those core functions to make sure that it's seamless for both the company and the actual candidate that's doing the interviewing.
I remember years ago doing a training, actually it was here in New York, for an organization that was working with their recruiters, and we'd gone through all of this, how to read a resume, what to look for, how to interview. And the one feedback I heard, which I'd love to hear you all respond to, is I don't have that much time per resume, right? I mean, I'd love to do these things. I'd love to look at LinkedIn. We know that AI is now a possibility. Are there other tools or other ways that we can help recruiters, internal or external, spend the extra time on that resume, knowing they've got about 7 seconds for every resume that comes through? Bobby?
Yes, and I think I heard it referenced in one of the other panels is leveraging the automation piece. The only note that I would add to that is some of the ATSs out there are, I'm going to say it's going to be off-putting, but discriminatory because it's not including certain military-friendly key phrases. So if you're looking at someone who has, and we spoke about it earlier in this panel, a very militarized resume, and none of the content is going to appear in the iCIMS or ATS search, then that person is not going to get caught in the net, right? They're not going to be the 10 or 20 resumes that filter through to the recruiter to have the 7 seconds to take a peek at. So the one thing that I would say is that be inclusive, whatever software program that you're using to vet, and if you're a smaller company and it's actually a human that's doing it, kudos to you, and make sure that that person knows what they're looking at to be able to read between the lines, again, to highlight the essential skills, the soft skills that we're talking about. So you get a really good candidate. But if not, it's going to be something that you're going to have to make sure that your software is inclusive.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. And you're right. I think it does go to automation. When I mentioned we have about 500, about 500,000 or so applications a year, we do have live people looking at those, right? There is a first layer. So the first layer is what we call a kick out question or knockout questions. And the very first piece of it, that if you don't meet a minimum requirement, then the system will automatically say you're not qualified. If you meet all the minimums, the next step is the recruiter. And to your point, when you have, again, maybe larger companies or high demand roles, high volume roles, where there's a lot of applicants, they only have 7, 10, 20 seconds to review, right? So for us, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, how do we find the vets and the spouses? We have it in every application. Every application, it asks you, are you a veteran? Check. Are you a military spouse? Check. That checkbox is how we're able to prioritize the applicant pool so that whenever the recruiters are now ready to review them, they will review, and they've been trained to review every veteran and spouse in that applicant pool. And then now whether they look at the other 300 or so, that's up to them and how they go about doing it. But they will see those ones first. And typically on the average, I think somewhere between 10 to 20% of our applicants on a roll is veterans and spouses. So it's a smaller population. They're easier to get to those, spend more time on them, use the tools, LinkedIn and what have you, and then they can go to the rest. That's how we've done
I would advocate for education. So whoever you have reviewing those, make sure they know what to look for. Make sure they know what the different phrases are, what the keywords are. Like Lita said, you have 7 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds to review a resume. Whoever's reviewing that needs to know what to look for. So educate those folks on the military experience keywords, and even some of the less obvious ones, right? But if they know what they're looking for, they can be way more efficient during that 7 or 10 second period.
I'm going to +1 to that. We actually review all of our resumes with a human eye. We don't use any kind of AI for that, so I can't really speak to that. But we do a lot. You have to educate people, and again, to my point earlier, you really have, it has to be a priority from leadership. When then maybe that person will be able to give 30 seconds to that resume if they know this is a priority, and educating people on it. And one interesting thing that I saw, and this is something that also gets through the cracks, is that, you know, military spouses, like, they move every 2 years, and some companies are like allergic to people who change jobs every 2 years. And you can't really tell that it's a military spouse unless, like, someone gave me the resume and they were like, what do you think's going on here? Why is this person moved from, like, these, you know, weird places? Why were they in North Carolina and then, you know, Kentucky and, like, all these? And I was like, okay, well, that is a military spouse resume. But so you really have to educate people on that and let them understand and know. But, like, again, that took a little bit of time to figure out. So the fact that it's a priority hiring, then we can make that time and spend the time. But it's hard when people don't know, and that's not even coming up through, like, an MOS code or something. So my other point is, if you are advising people on resumes, make sure that you can describe things, like, you help recruiters understand what's in your resume. That's going to make the 7 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds be more efficient and in your favor. Like, you can say that you went to the Army War College. Now, to be honest, most recruiters wouldn't know what that was, or that it was prestigious, or, you know, so you can write what that is, like, in parentheses. You could put a bullet if you're a military spouse and say, you know, left job because trailing spouse for a military member. I mean, you can say all that. Help the recruiter to see what's on the resume. Help the recruiter understand the resume. Ideally, you just want to get the recruiter to give you the thumbs up and push you over to the hiring manager. And that's really what we're in the business of. And you have it automated, so you can push people right into the recruiter and then hopefully into the hiring manager.
Fabulous. So what questions are coming up for you? We've got 2 microphones. I see people starting to get up. Let's take a few questions because we got some real experts up here. Please, sir.
Hi, good morning. George Ramsey with Micron Technology. So I think it's important that we start first with dispelling the myth that applicants only have 7 seconds or so for the resumes to be reviewed. Certainly, I talk to my recruiters about making sure that we're giving applicants who are applying for jobs, you know, the due diligence to make sure that we're finding the right talent. But I do have a question for the panelists. And this could be for all or one of you. What is the importance of companies utilizing programs such as pre-hire mentoring programs that offer opportunities for veterans to have their resumes reviewed, receive interview tips, and the like, to be able to move through the process of getting around the hiring managers who are not yet willing or accustomed to reviewing those applications, and or offering mass hiring events, much like we see with many of the associations like Recruit Military doing, but companies offering those types of events where veterans are coming in and have opportunities to hire and be offered opportunities on the spot. Thank you.
I could start that off. Sure. I'll answer the second part in the first. So as far as events, I think many companies can go to those because now it's an open population of people and what have you. Once you get into the application hiring process is where the rules start to shift, right? So to provide any additional coaching to an applicant is not equitable across the applicant pool, right? So for us, we do it pre-application. Anything pre-application, 100%. You know, we'll do everything we can to help coach, educate, and you name it. Go to the events, you know, give one-on-ones, whatever. But once they enter into the applicant pool, is where it shifts. So for us, and you know, financial services is the most regulated industry in the country, if not the world. So no matter what we would like to do, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to go to some of those. Maybe some that are less bureaucratic or what have you, that don't have those processes maybe can. So for us, the first part on doing anything after they've applied would be a big challenge. But everything prior to that, we try to get as much we can out in the population to be able to help those and coach and mentor.
We do something at Google in June as part of our what's called Google Serve, which is our volunteer month where we all try to do something. And VetNet, our ERG, led by, I don't know if anyone knows Mike Benedoso, who is like the most amazing person, West Point grad, and the leader of all of our VetNet. We have a program, and now it's online, and it used to be in person in each of our offices. We invite veterans in. They can get their resume reviewed by a Googler, oftentimes a recruiter, and then they can do some interviewing prep with them as well. We do one-on-one meetings with people, and I don't know the exact numbers. I'd say it's at least 5,000 people now in that program that come in and have the ability to like meet with someone. So we have something like that, but to your point, I understand how regulated you are. We don't really do a lot of that after they're in the process, unless they hook up with someone from the ERG, and the ERG, someone on the ERG says, "Oh, I'll talk to them about being a program manager or whatever." But it can't be the hiring manager. It kind of has to be someone from outside for fairness.
So, and that answer varies depending on your maturity in the vet space, right? And so if you're in a company that's in the fledgling stages and you're not really set up to mentor, coach, or provide guidance, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind in that stage, right? So there are other organizations that can help facilitate that, though. For example, Empower Employ is one of those organizations, and there's been a campaign for different industries to go in their Empower Hour, so to speak. It's a program that they have and talk about the things, how you make that disconnection go away between your industry and those candidates, right? So Caruso Homes, myself, spoke on their behalf at one of their recent Power Hours. Intuit has also spoken on that behalf. So there are organizations and ways, if you're not structured, like if you're not one of the larger players in the game and you don't have the ability to have that, you can do it on a smaller scale. And I would say for my mid-sized company, I like to also pay it forward. Me and the recruiter, I actually interview all the veterans that come through the company. That's the reason why I say me and the recruiter, or the recruiter and I, to be correct. So we pay it forward. So if someone's not a match, right, I still tap them into the veteran network, because clearly their network has gotten them to me. I want to make sure that they have the best opportunity in the industry. And if it's my company, awesome. If it's not my company, that's fine. I still want you to land in my industry because you make my industry stronger. So I plug them into other sources and other connections that they may not be aware of. And that's another way to advocate and to train up, right? And in those conversations, hey, it's not necessarily a fit, but here are some things that you can do. And LinkedIn's been a huge tool for that, because you can quickly just @ someone and introduce them to a whole litany of contacts that they did not know even existed.
Can I turn this on you and ask you that question? Because you are at so many companies, and you are helping them with their veteran programs. Like, what are you seeing, even in to answer that question?
You know, and I do hear the 7 to 9 seconds from the people I'm speaking to, right? It's not me. I think the intention is so good. Where I come in as a civilian who spent 20 years in corporate, don't do the math. You know, I was in the corporate side and I work in the military side. So I'm kind of that unicorn that bridges both, but they want to do the right thing. They want to understand. We've got a veteran sitting at attention going, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, to a 22-year-old hiring manager who doesn't understand. So there's disconnect sometime on both sides. I see a lot of great companies even just doing a little bit, that's making a huge difference. I see all this conversation that's helping the veteran community or the prior military community understand these nuances that aren't taught in TAP. That is making a huge difference. It's about coming together in the middle, and then both sides win. But I don't think it's a silver bullet. I don't think it's one thing in particular. I think everything you've mentioned, everything the other panelists have mentioned, has been extremely important to pay attention to. Any other questions? Please.
And while you're walking over, can I just say, Bobby, that's amazing that you interview all of the veterans. That's very impressive, and pay it forward. I mean,
it a $500,000 like USA?
No. It's not. It's not. We have in the past year we've onboarded 50 employees. We have 150 employees total and growing. We're growing markets about like every 6 months. We're in a new market space.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome, sir.
Cool. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name's Cameron Day. I work at PPL Corporation as a diversity manager. I just had a general question as it relates to just the recruiters. I feel like there has been a lot of information about like what, vets can do to like update their resumes and make sure that the skills are transferable. Do you know of any other kind of sources that an employer can do with their recruiters to ensure that they're more aware of like what those skills are? If we do have veterans that are applying that haven't actually maybe updated their resume, so then they're not overlooked.
Yeah, I can start. Utilize the tools you have. You said you're from PPL?
Yeah.
Okay. You're actually one of our clients. So we could talk offline, but you have a very active veteran population at PPL. I know that because I'm plugged into them.
Mm-hmm.
So utilize them, right? Like what and for example, they would have a lot of knowledge as to what skills would translate into particular skills within your company. And that goes for any size company, really, large or small. If you have resources within your company that know your company and know veteran space, I mean, that's perfect, right? Leverage those tools, have a conversation with those folks, link them up with the recruiters, potentially hire specifically veteran recruiters that can translate it on the spot. But those are all different ways that you can leverage things you already have without going external to a different source. Just, start with leveraging what you already have.
Anyone else?
I was just going to say, from the interview side, one of the things that we've done is established a policy that if there is a veteran as part of the candidate slate, then there should be a veteran on the interview panel. And so we leverage our VetNet. We have about 7,500, Chuck can correct me on that number, between vets and no spouses within our VetNet community. And so that's a untapped resource that we can leverage to help assist with the interview paneling. Maybe not so much the resume piece, because I know that's all conducted through our recruiters and what they do. But once they push it forward for the interview, which is where we see our biggest drop off, that's where our biggest drop off is typically is in the interview. Because now they crack through the code of the recruiter who has saw their skills. They presented it to the hiring manager who doesn't see those skills, right? And so at the end of the day, they're the ones making the decision. And so we try to influence that a little bit by bringing in veterans and no spouses on our panels to help.
Perfect. Oh.
And that's well said. And if you don't have that person, I think just to chime in on that scenario, if you don't have an ERG set up yet, you don't have a VetNet, and there are other companies out there that can do that translation and be able to assist with that. Coming from a space where I had the benefit of growing in that ERG and DE&I council, and now transition to a smaller company, it changes a bit drastically, right? So as the person that does that internally, now you'll find that when you're speaking with the recruiter, they'll start to pick things up and start to Google all the many because military translators.
Nice plug, Bobby.
They're not binging it.
They're not binging it. They can translate using the military translators that are at a rudimentary level, right? That exists on certain websites. But it's really that education piece that we were talking about earlier, and making sure that you build their lexicon on what what a leadership school actually gives you, no matter which branch you're in, whatever the leadership school is called, what it actually provides.
I was going to say one more thing about that. One other thing I would say to all of you who are out there hiring veterans, or your companies are hiring veterans, to your point, is find out where veterans are falling off the process. Are they not getting in for the first screen? Are they not getting through the recruiter? Are they not getting through the hiring manager? Are they not doing what we would call like a full panel? And what I would do, like in your case too, is like monitor where they're falling off. Is there a hiring manager that you sent that interviewed 10 veterans in the past year and they've only hired one? That's a 10% number. That's that's something that would be a flag. So you can always monitor in smaller companies too, how your hiring managers are doing, and see if then you need to educate them, because educating recruiters is truly only one part of the piece. Educating the hiring managers is much harder. I'm sure as a DEI, educating your hiring managers is a lot harder. So try to find out where candidates are falling out of your process, just to make sure that your process is fair for them, and not everyone can be interviewed by Bobby. So there you go.
No, just one, I'm sorry, just to add, the diverse slate reporting, if your company is not doing diverse slate reporting, it's a missed opportunity, right? And if you're not up on what creating a diverse slate is and how to go about it, that's another benchmark opportunity. But the after action reporting on that, after the candidate is selected, getting those feedback loop reports back to the hiring manager, because they may be unaware of their unconscious bias. Right. So it's a good way to kind of put that on Front Street and have a discussion.
So we're going to take one quick question. Okay.
Well, this is almost like throwing a boulder in a pond here a little bit, but this is maybe for another discussion, maybe over lunch, but maybe something to contemplate. I'm Eddie Dunn from the Civilian Ready Foundation. Do you think there will ever be a time where we'll no longer need resumes?
Yeah, that's a lunchtime conversation. No, Eddie, good question. I think, I think like with everything, it's going to morph, right? With technology and with the needs of the different companies. But at some level, we're always going to have to know what someone is good at, or what someone has experience in, or that's critical. So is that in a paper resume? Is that on to what we did earlier, a digital resume? Is it a different medium that we're gonna have to get that information from? So yeah, I think at some point that will exist. I think the systems that control the resumes now, we don't personally use those because we're not that big. Someday we may, hopefully, fingers crossed. But right now, it's the easiest way to get that initial snapshot. Now that snapshot may take a different form down the road, and we'll morph to that as it happens. But I think we're going to need something.
People sometimes now will just do LinkedIn and like not even do a resume. And LinkedIn is great because there's because you don't have to edit your resume. You don't have to fit it on 1 page or 2 pages. So we see some people try to just get away with a LinkedIn resume, but we haven't gotten anybody on TikTok or anything yet. I mean, I'm sure that's coming in the future, but it hasn't happened for us yet.
And one quick one on that one. If anybody uses Workday, that's what USAA uses, right? So as part of the application, they have to input their resume because it parses that out and becomes what the recruiter sees. So to your point, I think maybe down the road, probably further down the road than we think, but it'll be a challenge just because the process has been in place for so long.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank our panel. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Excellent. I know we have a great rest of the day. And thank again all of you who have served and chosen to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.